Due to it being an election year, where power, politics, and money are especially relevant, we chose to ask people of several different cultures about power dynamics. It is an interesting topic to all of us, and understanding it in the context of different cultures is important in developing educated and lasting relations with those of other cultures. Therefore, we decided to interview a diverse group of people about power dynamics. An anarcho-communist, a libertarian, a feminist, an East Asian exchange student, and an Ethiopian foreign exchange student. We asked them questions to learn how are power dynamics as described by people of other cultures, and in what ways do they influence communication. We used pre-scheduled class connections with Russia, Turkey, and Costa Rica, asked them questions relevant to our project. We also scheduled interviews with the relevant intercultural parties, using a flip camera to record what was said. From there, we took this research and tied it to information from the Intercultural Communication and Context, our textbook. From there, we viewed it through an interpretive critical lens. We went under the assumption that each intercultural viewpoint would be unique and subjective, but ultimately give us the information about power dynamics that is the truth. First, we'll be presenting the interviews conducted with these people of several cultures. From there, we will take a look at our class connections with Russia, Turkey, and Costa Rica. Finally, we will conclude with a summary of the research that we have conducted, as well as some closing remarks.
The corporate CEOs and the money masters and the people who have the power to buy politicians. Unless the masses of working people decide to revolt and take what should properly, historically be theirs to begin with.
The people.
White men have power in the United States because the way our society is designed is that they are the privileged group. They have privilege over people of color, women, trans people, homosexuals.
It appears this varies greatly depending on who you ask. What the Occupy anarcho-communist and the libertarian both agreed on, though, is that it seems either the people have the power or have the ability to take the power. However, the occupier and the feminist both believe that it's those who have effectively been born with what could be called white privilege who have the power.
Frankly, there's still this mass illusion that we live under some sort of democracy. So as to how did they, come to get this power, I'd say it was, a period of, historical struggles of the working class and then, the ruling elite.
Through the belief that government is there to serve the people, not the other way around,
A lot of people's, American dream and ultimate goal might be to be rich, but frankly, that is why it is called a dream, and or may more accurately be called illusion or a delusion. These dreams of achieving riches and wealth and mass fortunes are frankly impossible for the vast majority of people unless you already have the connections, unless you already have these ties.
Almost completely. There's always a factor of luck in anything, but I think if you put your mind to it and you try working hard, I believe anyone can attain almost any position.
Of course, there is individual gain. There are people work to the top. Not all straight white men are the 1%, but it is inherent in our society that white men have an initial privilege over everyone else. It's a lot easier for a straight white male to make it to the top than it would be for a lesbian black woman.
Their answers to the question is directly related to how they describe who has power. If he or she did not fit into their description of who has power, then he or she is not going to believe that they are in control of gaining power.
If I was a member of the 1%, I would be worried about mass revolt, as well as worried about, living longer and, continuing, us being in power by any means necessary.
This is kind of a trick question, but to get reelected, essentially. Is that what it should be? No. But it is. It's America.
As communication expert Mark Orb states, Quote, "People in power, consciously or unconsciously, create and maintain communication systems that reflect, reinforce, and promote their own ways of thinking and communicating." Both the occupier and the libertarian address this, although they mostly focused on conscious concerns of maintaining power in political, social, economic, and communication-based contexts.
People in power, again, treat everyone else like cattle and sheep, and they'll do whatever it takes, to remain in power.
Well, again, it's individual basis, but there is also the institutional oppression, the institutional racism, the institutional sexism, transphobia, etc. They want to keep their power, and so they will do things to make sure that they stay in power. Just the inherent being above them, accepting privilege, not thinking about it, means that they are treating the lesser people, or the oppressed groups, not the lesser people, differently or worse than they would their peers.
For the most part, people are docile. There has to be some sort of catastrophe for people to wake up. And that may be a global economic meltdown. After we use up our First Amendment rights to such an extent, then we have to go to the Second Amendment.
The less fortunate feel as though they have a right to things that's really a privilege. Especially when it comes to the Social Security system, they think, oh, I have a right to retire at 65. No, it's a privilege. You earn it.
As a generalization, I think that there is that resentment, there is that feeling of oppression, because the people who are oppressed tend to feel that oppression and are more aware of that privilege than the people who are privileged. They don't have that privilege. It's not as easy for them to make it to the top.
Of course, the most senior members, they get the biggest offices. So that it is really displaying their power. Like, hey, I'm going to keep getting elected. You can't do anything about it. I have all the power here. Power can be shown also through passing bills that the other party hates, the party system at least.
There are the blatant symbols of power, like, material goods, nice clothing, a lot of money. But I think the more important symbols are the ones that you don't see, which are the ones that are institutionalized, like the fact that white men make more money than women, little tiny things that people of color don't have that people in power do have. When you go to the store and buy Band-Aids, Band-Aids are supposed to match your color, like the skin color. But if you'll notice, they always are a lighter shade of tan, which means that they're meant to fit white people's skin, which means that the norm, or what is considered to be proper skin color, is a white person's skin.
Oh, you're powerful, you must have a great life. I mean, that's a quick assumption. A lot of the less fortunate, they often perceive people with power as like robber barons, if you will.
The person not in power might perceive the person in power as, greedy or mean, maybe even like a thief, taking from them. That question specifically is more of an individual basis.
Often people with power see the less fortunate as lazy, which I can see why, according to the American dream. If they did, elbow grease, work their way up.
There is that generalization that if you're not in power, you are lazy, that you just don't want it as much, that maybe they're uneducated, not a smart person who probably has a drug addiction, long shaggy beard, really terrible clothes, on the street corner begging for people to give them stuff, not doing anything on their own means, having the assumption that they're, useless, probably inebriated.
As discussed by the libertarian and the feminist, class identity plays a large part in how people of one socioeconomic class describe those of another socioeconomic class. As shown by studies from both 1987 and 1992, a person's hobbies, social networks, and even the foods they eat may have a correlation with their socioeconomic class. Although these studies may reinforce stereotypes such as all rich people eat scallops, not all class stereotypes are so benign. Stereotypes of a person's character based on their class may also emerge, regardless of their accuracy. In fact, a 1990 study revealed that people often remember information that supports these preconceived stereotypes, while discarding information that may discredit them.